And now, the rest of the story. Were they really plotting to assassinate the President of the United States? All of the evidence we have says yes. It would seem indeed the most malevolent of all conspiracies, and yet among the most difficult of all crimes to prove. Let's examine the facts. On June 15, two men were jailed in New York City on a counterfeiting rap. Their names Thomas Hickey and Michael Lynch. 2 days later, June 17, a prisoner in the next cell calls out to a guard. He says he must be released at once, at least long enough to speak to the authorities. I suspect the other prisoner wanted a bargain, but in any case, he did have a lot with which to bargain. He had some very important information. In the safety of court chambers, he confided that he had overheard Tom Hickey and Mike Lynch in the other cell next door, had overheard them talking about treason, had drawn inference that some sinister plot in which Hickey and Lynch were involved had been financed by our nation's enemies. Well, apparently there were 9 men in the conspiracy. 7 of them would still be at large. So with these words, an investigation was launched, and Hickey and Lynch confessed. Yes, their plan was to aid an enemy attack. Hickey had recruited the other conspirators. He had counted on the services of one in particular, a fellow named William Green. Now, there are powerful indications, which I cannot prove, that this conspiracy included a plot to assassinate the President of the United States. That would have to mean that investigators were withholding information from the public, or perhaps that those implicated refused to tell all they knew. But in any event, aides to the commander-in-chief did indeed rush to his side and were greatly concerned for his safety. Rumors circulated that he had narrowly escaped eating poisoned food. Now, the full dimension of this conspiracy may never be known because Thomas Hickey was tried and executed, and the others, imprisoned, had nothing more to say about it. But you see, the mysterious treasonous plot of which you've just learned was uncovered in June of 1776, and this was just days before the document by which we declared our independence. And it involved a president, our first president before he was president, General George Washington. Of course, the tides of history might have turned had he been killed. But at his trial, June 26, 1776, Thomas Hickey related his plan to aid the British in capturing the colonies. It was he, Hickey, who had organized the conspiracy, and for this he was hanged. He also conspired to assassinate General Washington and had come very close to succeeding. That was repeated as a fact in history textbooks for more than 100 years. Now, today's historians raise some questions for which there are no answers, and yet more striking than anything we can surmise is what we know for certain, that Thomas Hickey, as well as the others implicated in this conspiracy, at least 8 others, that they, the men who sought to subvert our independence, the disloyalists who might have extinguished the life of our first president before he became president, each of these 9 was a member of General George Washington's own personal bodyguard. And now you know the rest of the story.
Welcome to the rest of the story. It's impossible not to notice that I'm wearing a tricorn, which was the fashionable hat of the era. I just thought it was fitting for the occasion. On June 26, 1776, 20,000 spectators, which included soldiers and citizens, gathered in a field which is now Manhattan's Chinatown for the public execution of Thomas Hickey. It was the largest crowd to watch a public execution in the colonies at the time, and is likely the largest one to ever happen in American history. Thomas Hickey was certainly involved in the plot to assassinate General George Washington, but he was not the mastermind behind the conspiracy. The plot was formed by loyalists, including the British-appointed governor of New York, William Tryon, and the mayor of New York City, David Matthews. Governor Tryon made other attempts to sabotage the colonies. Tryon had worked to undermine the economy of the colonies and had been found guilty of running a counterfeiting operation. Remember that Mr. Harvey said Thomas Hickey and Michael Lynch had been arrested on counterfeiting charges. This may have been how Governor Tryon and Thomas Hickey met. Another theory is that Governor Tryon used the counterfeiting ring to get close to a member of the Life Guard, Washington's personal guards. The Loyalists hoped that by eliminating the colony's commander-in-chief, the colonial military would be confused and would weaken, which would give the British a huge advantage. Thomas Hickey, like all of the soldiers in the Life Guard, was handpicked by George Washington. But Hickey had a reputation for changing sides to suit his own needs. He'd been a soldier in the British Army during the 7 Years' War, but deserted and joined the Connecticut militia at the beginning of the American Revolution. It is unclear why Washington chose Hickey to join the Life Guard. As a conspirator in the assassination plot, Thomas Hickey recruited or attempted to recruit other members of the Life Guard to join in the conspiracy. The total number of people who were involved with or knew of the plot remains unknown to this day. As Mr. Harvey explained, the plot was discovered when Thomas Hickey bragged in his jail cell about being part of the assassination plot. Prisoner Isaac Ketchum overheard Hickey and reported what he had heard to prison officials. This information was then reported to the Committee for Detecting and Defeating Conspiracies, headed by John Jay. Now, John Jay was the first Supreme Court Chief Justice and was the author of the Federalist Papers. He is considered the founder of counterintelligence in America because of his creation of this very committee. Following an investigation, Thomas Hickey was court-martialed and charged with, quote, exciting and joining in a mutiny and sedition, and treacherously corresponding with, enlisting among, and receiving pay from the enemies of the United Colonies. United Colonies. Can you imagine if that term had stuck and our country became the United Colonies of America? On June 26, 1776, Thomas Hickey was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. In our modern era, a person sentenced to death can spend years, even decades, on death row while awaiting appeals. But justice in the late 1700s was swift. Just 2 days later, his sentence was carried out. Hickey was the first person executed for treason against what became the United States of America. George Washington made an example out of Hickey. He wrote, I am hopeful this example will produce many salutary consequences and deter others from entering into the like traitorous practices. While Hickey's execution may have deterred some, it failed to deter all traitors. Remember Benedict Arnold? Speaking of Benedict Arnold, in 1777, Governor Tryon was promoted to Major General of the Provincials. Tryon led his men in the Battle of Ridgefield and defeated Patriot forces led by General David Wooster and Benedict Arnold. In September of 1780, Tryon returned to his home in London. New York Mayor David Matthews was arrested on June 22, 1776 for being engaged in a conspiracy against the authority of the Congress and the liberties of America. Like Hickey, Matthews was sentenced to death. His date of execution was set for August 25th. Due to his status as governor, Matthews was allowed certain freedoms such as, this is a quote, to walk abroad for the benefit of the air in the daytime and to attend divine services at some place of public worship. He eventually escaped. A $50 reward was offered for his recapture. Matthews adamantly denied the charges against him. However, he later filed a claim for compensation to the Royal Commission in London for the estate he lost in the colonies. In it, he admitted that he had formed a plan for the taking of Mr. Washington and his guard prisoners, which was not affected by an unforeseen discovery that was made. In December 1776, he resumed his office as mayor of New York, which was under British control. Sometime in the early 1780s, Matthews and his family left New York for Europe. Can you imagine how history would be different had the plan to assassinate George Washington succeeded? If it had, I might be ending this video saying something like, "God save the King," or "Long live the King." I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And I'm going to end this video simply as Paul Harvey would say, good day. Cold out here. Ooh, my hands are cold.